The auditor in Island County, Washington, instituted this asinine policy that they had to wear COVID masks. Yes, in 2024, in order to observe ballot counting from a safe distance, even, they had to wear masks. Tim Hazelo and other Republicans didn't believe that that was even lawful, that the auditor had the authority to make such a rule. And so they decided that they were going to go in and they were going to sign in as ballot observers, and they weren't going to wear a mask, and they were going to see what happens. Here's what happened to Tim Hazelo.
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Miller?
What's your name?
Tim Hazelo.
Tim Hazelo?
Yeah, good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've met before.
So, tell me what's going on here.
I'm just observing my civil rights as the observer.
Okay, but as I know, they made a policy that you wear a mask while you're in
which
here.
the RCW doesn't give them the authority to do so.
That's still a policy that's been set. You need to leave.
Are you
been
going to
asked
write
to
me a
leave by-
citation?
If I need to,
Then,
let's go. The charge is disorderly conduct.
gotcha.
Okay, you have a mandatory court appearance.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions for
No,
me? I'm going to
no.
ask you not to return here today.
I won't.
Or you can end up in jail.
I won't.
Okay.
Should I go sign out, though?
What's that?
Because I have to sign in as an observer. Should I sign out?
I will escort you up there to sign out,
Okay.
and then you can be on
No,
your
that makes
way.
sense. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, no, you're not confused. This isn't communist China. This is the United States of America. And he gets two cops come in, escort him out over a COVID mask. Insane. Now, look, Tim Hazelo went in there knowing he was challenging this rule. And in fact, the purpose was, and you heard him there, are you going to cite me? He wanted to get cited for it. He did want to get cited for it. I think he probably didn't expect the citation at the time to be disorderly conduct, because as you've seen from the video, there was nothing disorderly about what happened there. But he wanted to and did ultimately pursue, which is in progress, a civil lawsuit against the county, essentially saying you can't hurt our ability to be ballot observers, particularly when clearly one side of the political aisle is less likely to be willing to wear a mask to observe ballots. And so he thought if he would need to be essentially cited or kicked out in order to have standing to be able to pursue a civil case. So he expected that. What he didn't expect is for a politically far left prosecutor who's on the record hating Trump supporters, wishing death on anti-maskers, to take what happened there in that video and turn it into a felony offense. As you know, the prosecutor, Greg Banks, ended up charging Tim Hazelo with trespassing and with unlawful entry into a voting center, which is a felony under Washington state law. And on Thursday, a jury of his peers figure out how this happened, convicted Tim Hazelo. He's now awaiting sentencing, which could happen in a matter of days. He faces up to 6 years in prison. Oh, yes, 6 years in prison over this. It's a miscarriage of justice. It is political prosecution. So we finally got a chance this morning, just before the show, to check in with Tim Hazelo. I've been in touch with him via text over the weekend. He's obviously very upset, although he's still determined to see all of this through. He wasn't in a good place where we could do a video interview with him, but we taped a phone call with him just before we came on today. Tim Hazelo, how are you doing, my friend?
Well, I have been better. Thanks for asking, Brandi. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I was in touch with you throughout the process of trial and trial preparations last week, and you didn't seem so confident, to me at least. I mean, you definitely were worried. Where was that feeling coming from?
The biggest hard feeling I had that gave me the most strife was the fact that that the prosecution was so selective, that the rule was selectively held and acted on, and that we couldn't even bring any of that stuff up in the court. By the first day of deliberations in the court, my brain had already said, crap, we've lost this, because we couldn't talk about the whack that authorizes the auditor to do what she does. We couldn't talk about the law that we're being charged with, which just blows my mind. We couldn't talk about other people not wearing masks. And the list goes on. You covered it, actually, in your show on Thursday before I'd even talked to you about all the different discrepancies and reasons that the jury's not hearing the right stuff.
Yeah. You made a decision to take the stand. Was that a mistake?
Hindsight being 20/20, I think it might have been a mistake. But you look at it this way: if I didn't take the stand and I was convicted anyway, then I'd be upset that I didn't take the stand, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I don't know, for lack of a better term. We thought we'd be able to get up there and get our our message across, and we were just shut down at every move. I'll give you a real simple, for instance. So Austin, my attorney, asked me, had I ever heard of unauthorized access to a polling place prior to being charged with it? And before I could even say no, Banks had already, what do they call it, objected to that question, and the judge had already said I'm not allowed to answer that question. So even the simplest little things like that, we weren't even allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, for me, there are some, and I've said, I mean, you went in there knowing that you were going to be violating this masking rule, and there was a part of you that wanted something to happen so you could ultimately challenge it, which I know there's a civil lawsuit moving forward in that regard. So to me, it's really the unlawful entry issue, because that's the felony. I don't think it's relevant to this case. Is there anything you did in signing in, any agreement you signed? Because I'm trying to get to how they got to you unlawfully entering when you actually, in fact, signed in. So did you enter under false pretenses?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, when I walked in, I actually asked if I had to sign the rules again in case they may have changed. Because the rules I signed on the 29th when I went down there to check on the other observers that had already signed to do this, those are the rules I signed, because you have to sign it before you go in. And I checked with the front desk and I said, hey, I'm here to observe. Do I need to re-sign the rule sheet? And he said, nope, you just sign in here on the log entry and go back there and observe the election. And that's exactly what I did. Once again, I was quiet and courteous. I didn't even talk to a poll watcher, nothing. I didn't talk to anybody. I just sat down.
Yeah, there was the prosecutor in this case is interesting for a lot of reasons. Of course, we've talked about his political bias against conservatives and Trump supporters and people who won't mask up. One of our viewers sent Mr. Banks an email after your conviction, basically, accusing him of lawfare. And the prosecutor, which this is so unusual, he sent a lengthy response back to just this random person. And he spent a lot of time, I mean, it was such a long email, trying to justify, what he did and the crime you were charged with. And in this email to this citizen, he says, Mr. Hazelo intentionally interfered with the administration of a presidential election. Is anything you did in the room that day, could it be construed as interfering with the administration of a presidential election?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I was pretty sure Trump was going to win anyway. So why would I even risk any of that, first and foremost? And second of all, my whole existence for the last 5 years in politics has rotated around election integrity. We just want it to be right. And I don't think the auditor's office was doing anything weird with the ballots. I think Island County does a pretty darn good job. But we have to make sure, and that's why we go to watch.
Yeah. So what happens now, Tim? You're facing sentencing. My understanding is you could be facing up to 6 years in prison based on the crime and the classification. I highly doubt, although, I doubted you were going to be convicted. So what do I know? So what happens from here?
We're going to put in some stays and some motions. We're going to look for some appeals. We want the court to have to dig further into this unauthorized access to a polling center law, because if you look at the legislative debates and history of this, it has nothing to do with what happened on that day. It has to do with sneaking in and destroying ballots or find a way to weasel your way into the electronics or something of that nature. And none of that happened, and nobody's even arguing that did happen. So what we need is the court to look at this law, the courts, the appeals courts, somebody outside of who prosecuted this and judged this in this particular instance, to determine whether that law even applies, because it does not. And at the furthest stretch of the imagination, it's hard to make it apply if you can explain the law and you know the law. And that was the problem. In the courtroom, we weren't allowed to talk about actual RCWs, actual laws. And that was very disturbing. Hopefully all that comes to light, and that's what we do. So we have to appeal it. There's no way around it. The big problem is the cost of appealing and having the right legal team to push the right issues and push the right buttons, and the time frame. we're on a 10-day clock, and it's not 10 business days. It's 10 days, period.
Yeah, and I know there's some kind of work behind the scenes to try to, figure out from a monetary perspective and legal team perspective. So maybe we'll have some updates on that in the days to come.
Yeah.
Tim, I was just sick about this all weekend. Really worried about you, worried about Tracy, who comes next. And there's a lot of national attention on this now. I can tell by this prosecutor's email to just this random citizen that he is feeling the heat, maybe as he should, but he also feels the need to have to justify it. And I'm reading the email. There's several mistruths in it, which I'll point out to viewers after I wrap up with you here. So here you have a prosecutor with this long history of political bias who's blatantly emailing what I would consider lies to a constituent about the case. So Tim, we'll talk to you again here in the coming days as you await your sentencing. And we're going to try to do everything we can to bring attention to this case. So hang in there.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I can't even express how I feel about it. And my wife, she watches you every day. And so she's pretty tore up about this whole thing, probably more so than me. I tell people all the time, you're not shooting at me. I'm not stressed out, but I'm kind of stressed out right now, and I'm not being shot at, literally.
Yeah, well, you guys aren't alone, as much as it might feel like that. And, I'm just hoping that common sense and rational thought prevail in this. And so we'll touch base with you soon, okay?
Perfect. I appreciate it. And everything you do just helps out immensely, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, just insane stuff. I will say he sounded a little better today than when I talked to him, I think Friday morning, when I spoke to him. But look, felony is nothing to joke around about. And as much as he's, sticking to his guns and he really believes that what happened to him is wrong and that, this mask rule never should have been in place, there's a reality there. He requires a security clearance for his job. He's going to lose that unless this case is somehow overturned on appeal or something happens. That's really significant. And Tim isn't the only one in this situation. Remember, there's a woman named Tracy Abel who was also removed under the exact same circumstances from the exact same ballot counting office as Tim was. And Tracy also has something to lose. She's having the book thrown at her by this politically motivated prosecutor. I talked to her on Friday morning. She was very upset, worried, but still ready to see things through and not, she's not going to take a plea, even if the prosecutor wants her to. And she's risking losing volunteer hours at a local school. She loves it. She loves volunteering at her local school. She can't do it if she's a convicted felon. And again, we're talking about not wearing a mask in 2024. It's absolutely insane. So we're not going to let this go. It is getting increased national attention now, as it should. If this were a situation where they got cited with something, maybe even trespassed, maybe even told, hey, you can't come back in as ballot observers. We told you the rules, you didn't follow them. And then they pursued a civil case to challenge the masking rule. I wouldn't be as fired up about it because they knew what they were getting into. But no one could have ever predicted that this politically motivated Trump-hating prosecutor would turn this into a felony for these two individuals. I asked Tim Hazelo, I said, I'm just curious, do you have any other sort of criminal convictions that might, make it more likely that a judge goes with a high-end sentence? Like, no, this guy has no criminal history to speak of besides a few traffic things, which don't we all have a traffic thing? And this prosecutor, Greg Banks, is going to try to ruin their lives and upend their lives over this. It's wild. So I want to update you on one thing. So again, Greg Banks, one of the reasons primarily I believe this is politically motivated is not just because who in their right mind would charge these people with a felony, but he decided personally to prosecute these cases. As the elected prosecutor, which he acknowledged to us, he never does. But in this case, he felt very passionate about it. And maybe it's because he's a Trump hater. As we pointed out many times, he should have recused himself from this case because he's compared Trump supporters like Tim and Tracy to the KKK, called them racist bullies with second-grade intellects, said we have to cleanse society of their diseased thinking and then wish death on people who refuse to wear a mask. And this is the guy who we're supposed to believe is making these prosecuting decisions in the interest of justice and in good faith. So this Greg Banks guy, he's one weird hombre. Why did I call him an hombre? I don't think he's Hispanic. He's one weird dude. So when we were first breaking this story, back, gosh, what was it, November, December of this year, when he threatened them. And when we got a hold of a letter he sent to both Tim and Tracy, basically saying, if you don't plead guilty to a misdemeanor, I'm going to personally take this to trial as a felony. He threatened them. And we were reporting on that at the time, and we reached out, Nicole reached out, sent a long list of questions to the prosecutor's office. Should you recuse yourself? How can we expect that you're doing this fairly because of these past posts? Does this, do the charges really fit the crime? And he would send us these lengthy emails, which we thought was very odd at the time. I used to cover crime and justice exclusively, and it was very unusual for an elected prosecutor in the midst of a case to provide lengthy statements to the media trying to justify their rationale. Very odd. Usually the response you'd get from a prosecutor is, hey, we don't talk about ongoing cases. You know, we're gonna make our case in court. But he'd send us these 500-word responses trying to convince us that his motivations aren't political. We thought it was very strange. And apparently he has not given up on doing that. So not a surprise to me that he's being bombarded with emails over this, including from some of our viewers and listeners. And I would ask you guys to keep those emails respectful, as I always do. But we get forwarded an email response he sent one of our viewers. I won't say much about the viewer, just that they're a local pastor. And they decided to reach out to him to be critical of the decision to prosecute this as a felony. So I think to this viewer's surprise and to our surprise, Greg Banks again sends this guy this lengthy email the day after the jury verdict, trying to justify what he did, which to me, if you're working that hard to justify it, even to a random citizen, you know you did something wrong. You know you did something wrong. So I can't read the whole thing because it's so freaking long, but he sends this guy an email back, Greg Banks does, basically saying, I'm choosing to respond to you because he goes, I watched some of your church YouTube videos and I think you're a reasonable person, so I'm going to respond to you, which is just so weird. I'm going to read part of the response. Mr. Hazelo intentionally interfered with the administration of a presidential election and blatantly violated rules of conduct imposed by the elected county auditor. There is no proof that he blatantly interfered with the administration of a presidential election. People kept counting ballots. Police came in, told him to leave. He's like, okay. And then they went outside. He didn't blatantly interfere with the administration of a presidential election. That's just a lie at the worst, an over-exaggeration at the best. He goes on to say, those rules were designed to allow for the accurate, timely, reliable, and transparent administration of a very important election. Again, I don't understand how the masking rule is relevant to that. They were also designed to protect the elderly election staff who perform the tedious but vital work of running an election. Mr. Hazelo was given repeated opportunities to follow the rules or observe the election process unmasked from an adjacent room that would not put him in direct contact with election staff. He refused. Moreover, he insisted that he be charged with a crime and removed from the building. Eventually, he was granted his request, but not for lack of trying to get him to simply follow the rules that everyone else was following. I'm going to tear that apart in a second, but let me keep reading. I would like to, this is crazy. This is the elected prosecutor who just got a conviction trying to justify himself to a random citizen. He says, I would like to think that all Americans and all Washingtonians would be supportive of efforts to ensure elections are conducted properly. I believe in accountability, and I trust that my community would like to see that those who interfere with our elections are brought to justice. Think of that sentence, that those who interfere with our elections are brought to justice. Dude wouldn't wear a COVID mask in 2024. Who does this guy think he is? I would also like to think that all Island County residents would care about the health and well-being of the vulnerable election workers in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who lived through a COVID outbreak during their work in the August 2024 primary election. As a pastor, I trust that you also care about their well-being more than some of the commenters who have taken me to task, which is clearly talking about us and trying to sort of shame this pastor into agreeing with him because he's a man of God. So there's a lot to unpack in that. Clearly, though, he is working overtime to justify his actions. It tells me he knows that there is something that he needs to try to justify. But he talks at length about, don't you care about these elderly election workers? As we've pointed out many times, and I don't know if you can access the picture, Nicole, I didn't put it in there. One of those elderly election workers, an old man, was caught on video the day after Tim Hazelo was removed, not wearing a mask himself, while counting ballots. So how worried can the elderly election workers be and the auditor's office be about their health and well-being in the administration of the election and their safety and security and the sanctity of the election? If this dude's not even wearing a mask, he wasn't brought out by police, he wasn't brought up on felony charges. Kind of a moot point, isn't it? But you understand in this response, as he's trying to convince this random citizen that he's not politically motivated, his response is dripping with political motivation. It's dripping with his bias about COVID mandates and masking. And his belief that prosecuting Tim Hazelo and ultimately Tracy Abel with felonies is vital to protect the sanctity of elections? It's wild stuff. And let me be clear, this law on the books that he prosecuted them under as a felony, which prohibits unlawful entry, should exist. It's a good law. We need to have it. If someone breaks into an election center, if someone barges in and tries to stop the counting, if they go in and try to steal or destroy ballots, it should be a felony. But no one in their right mind should believe that this is that. So it's crazy. So Tim's awaiting sentencing, could face actual jail and or prison time over this. And then Tracy Abel is up next with her trial set to begin in August. And this guy, Greg Banks, he clearly shouldn't be within 100 yards of elected office. But he absolutely should not be prosecuting these cases given his clear political bias against Trump supporters and against people who refuse to wear a mask, who he wished death upon. Common sense stuff, people.